Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Vanda, founder of the Period Makeover Solution and Fertility Maximizer. Today, we are going to be tackling the question of Am I actually ovulating? And how you can definitively confirm that ovulation has occurred. Obviously, when you are trying to conceive, you have to have ovulation in order for you to be able to get pregnant. So, this is something that is a very hot topic with my fertility and trying to conceive clients. And, it's a common question. And there's, a knowledge gap in between. This isn't just like your standard sex education that you get as you are growing up and becoming a woman. And even when you're trying to conceive, sometimes this is a point that is not taught. So the first thing that I want to kind of dispel is the belief that if you're having a period, you're ovulating. That is actually not true. You can absolutely have periods and ovulation have not occurred. So that's definitely the first thing that we all kind of need to get on the same page with and understand. Now, in other instances, there are 5 different ways that I'm going to kind of chat through for how you can confirm that ovulation has occurred. What is kind of the best ways to do that? What's my favorite way to do that? The most reliable way to do that? And then, just to give you some more context for how you can observe this in yourself at home and monitor it, with a little assistance from a provider as well. So the first thing, and probably the most common way, I started to say the easiest way, but like the most cost-effective way to observe and try to confirm that ovulation has occurred is by monitoring your basal body temperature. After ovulation has occurred, you are going to see a slight rise in your basal body temperature, and it's not just going to rise, but it's going to stay risen. It's going to stay at that level until you start your period. Now, if you're someone that has not tracked your basal body temperature before, that is kind of totally new to you, there is a prior episode where I kind of went through some tips for accurately tracking your menstrual cycle. It was episode 91. That one might be a good episode to go back to and take a listen to. But that rise that you can expect to see can be anywhere, it's individualized, but it can be anywhere from like 0.4 to a whole degree Fahrenheit difference between what, you have observed your baseline to be while you were in your follicular phase. Then that ovulation is going to occur, and throughout your entire luteal phase, you will see a rise in that basal body temperature from baseline. Now, obviously, there's other things that can impact your body temperature. So that's why this is super informative. It's very meaningful. I definitely recommend that everyone, especially while you're trying to conceive, is tracking your basal body temperature every single day. We also have to keep in mind that there are other outside factors that could impact basal body temperature, and we don't want those other things like an illness or just a change in like temperature environment in general, to have bearing on how we interpret our own data. So just keep that in mind. Now, the other way that you can observe this within your own body would be to watch for those cervical mucus changes. This is another thing that I really encourage anyone to tune into your body, learn what's normal for you, learn what is normal and expected to be happening during the different phases of the month. And this is something easy. Like you can check this about yourself every day, multiple times a day, every time you go to the bathroom, you can kind of check this. After ovulation has occurred, you are going to notice a shift in that cervical mucus. It is going to become thicker, stickier. There's going to be less of it. Things are going to be drier. And that is an indication that there has been a shift again in the hormones. Now, a lot of times that does, yes, mean that ovulation has occurred, but that is not a definitive way to assess if ovulation has occurred or not. When we get to talking about more definitive ways, there is always the option for someone to go to the lab and have progesterone levels drawn about 7 days after their ovulation. Now, in order to most accurately capture this, you would need to be testing your LH so that you knew when that peak was, when your ovulation was, so you could time your 7 day visit to the lab appropriately and correctly to get that most accurate progesterone reading when you had that lab drawn. What we want to see is a peak. In your progesterone. We want it to be, up at a certain level, and it typically does peak about 7 days after ovulation. So that is what we would want to look for. The other definitive way would be through ultrasound monitoring. And this is a little complicated. This is not going to be for just your average person. This is likely going to be for the person that is maybe already battling some infertility and they're in the midst of a workup that is accompanying signs of infertility or maybe recurrent losses as they're trying to figure out what is happening, why is this happening. And in order for this to be confirmed with ultrasound, you would need to have an ultrasound while you're in your follicular phase as you're nearing ovulation to confirm that, there has been a follicle developed, then ovulation would occur, and you would come back later in your cycle to confirm that follicle that was being developed for that month, which is going to become the egg that you release for that month, has disappeared. And that, again, that is not going to be a very common occurrence. It's obviously not something you can do month to month, but I did want to mention it because it is an accurate way to assess that. Now, the last way that I want to talk about is my personal favorite way to monitor this and confirm that ovulation has occurred, and that is with the Mira at-home hormone tracking device. I talked about Mira. I've talked about it several times here on the podcast. But for kind of my initial discussion on Mira, you could flip back all the way to episode 81 and take a listen. Mira, to just kind of give you a brief backstory, it is an at-home hormone tracking device, meaning that you order this testing kit. You are sent a analyzer, which is a small little egg-shaped device, and testing wands. And you get up, not every morning of the month, but on certain mornings, and you collect your first morning urine. You dip the wand into the urine for 20 seconds. You insert it into the analyzer, and in about 16 minutes, you get a reading on your hormones. And with the kit that I recommend for my clients, we are looking at progesterone, estrogen, LH, and FSH. It just never fails to amaze me that we have access to that type of technology within our own home. I love it. I think it is so helpful and so useful. And, it really helps us to see the entire cycle and what the hormones are doing throughout that whole cycle. So we do still do other things along with this. We're still monitoring basal body temperature. We are still monitoring cervical mucus. We're still tracking intercourse. We're still pulling all of the pieces together, but then we also have this very factual, reliable data to also back us up and give us assurance. So, when you are doing that and you're able to track an entire cycle, we get to see the lead up essentially to ovulation. We get to see that our FSH is rising as that follicle is being developed. Then we get to see the rise in LH, which is what triggers ovulation to occur in the release of that egg. And then in the days following that peak of LH, we get to see what progesterone is doing. And just like if you were going to go to the lab and get your blood drawn, we're looking again for that progesterone level to rise and continue to rise throughout that luteal phase. That lets us know that ovulation has occurred. Sometimes what we will see is we track, the entire cycle. We'll see an LH peak. But then if there is no progesterone rise that follows that, it means that the body tried to ovulate. It was trying to send that signal, but for whatever reason, and we get into root cause reasons for that with HTMA testing. There's multiple um, episodes on this podcast about HTMA testing. You could flip back. The most recent one was episode 100. But we get into all of those reasons with other testing avenues. But that lets us know that for whatever reason, the body wasn't able to actually ovulate. And that can be a huge missing piece, especially for women that are trying to conceive maybe for their first time or maybe their second or third time. Like between babies, like they've had a baby and now they're ready to try for their second kiddo and they're trying and they're just like, it's just not happening. And I don't understand why. I don't know what's going on here. Sometimes, and it can especially be confusing because you're having those regular menstrual cycles, those regular bleeds. But as I said in the beginning, the regular bleeding doesn't mean that ovulation is actually occurring. And we have to have ovulation. We have to have the release of that egg and then successful implantation, which we have to have sufficient progesterone for in order for a pregnancy to occur and be sustained. So I hope that this has been super helpful, help answer some questions for you, maybe around ovulation and how to confirm ovulation. This is definitely one of the things that we are monitoring for, looking for, and addressing with my clients inside the Fertility Maximizer program. I did want to mention that we have a new group of Fertility Maximizer clients that are starting together, a very small group, on April 13th. So if you are listening to this in real time, that is next Monday. So there will be a link in the show notes where you can go and check out that program. There's also always a link in the show notes where you can go and book a clarity call with me if you just want to chat with me and say, this is what I've got going on. This is my situation. How would you help me? What would you recommend for me? Do you have a program that might assist me? Happy to do that with you. Those calls are free. And again, that link is in the show notes. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week and I will talk to you soon.